Watch where the fuck you're going! Selene hissed at the guy in the hoodie, who had crashed into her and had sent both of them sprawling on the floor. Her groceries were all over the place already, but the guy didn't even look back at her. He was pale, sickly looking, and seemed to have only eyes for the thing he dropped. A book with an off-white linen cover and his wallet. He was up on his feet before Selene could even gather herself and grabbed the book off the floor, jumping over her like a madman in the next second. She jerked back, evaded him as best she could, and turned around to see the guy jumping up the old dirty stairs leading to the next floor of the apartment complex. What a lunatic! Selene hissed while shaking her head. Normally, the junkies round here were slow, lethargic, and despondent, not that wild and hyperactive. She picked up an orange in a process of slowly rolling off to God knows where, then started grabbing all the other items that were strewn across the hallway. At least none of the packaging had burst, she told herself while shaking her head. That guy. She thought she'd seen him around here these past few months. He used to greet her every time they saw each other, but today he looked so different. Selene picked up the wallet and put it in her pocket before she grabbed the can of tuna, straightened her back, and let out a long sigh. What was she doing with her life? Almost 50, yet still living in this piece of shit apartment complex, just fighting to survive. Maybe she should become a junkie too. Then at least she'd only have to worry about the next fix, and not what would happen in a year or two. Selene balanced the bag on her hip as she fumbled around her pocket for the key to her apartment, then pushed the door open with another sigh. It looked the same as this morning. The same as yesterday, the day before, last week, last month, God damn it, last year. She felt like a spider trapped in a bathtub. Only, the spider probably didn't feel the time ticking down to its inevitable end. Nothing was going to change. Selene pushed the door closed with her foot, then locked it from the inside before she shuffled through the small apartment and put away her groceries. Why bother? She asked herself. It really wasn't like it would make a goddamn difference if she just stashed everything in the fridge. But she couldn't do that. That was not how she had been raised. Everything had its place, and you had to keep the apartment clean if you wanted a good life. It wasn't even funny anymore. Selene turned away and walked over to the couch. Maybe she could get a cat. Deep down she knew that she wasn't fit to care for any living thing right now. Having a pet would just force her to abandon it sooner or later. With how things were going, the cat would probably run off or something would happen to it, and then she would feel guilty as well as depressed. With a groan, she plopped herself down on the couch and turned on the TV. This was her life now, she told herself as she watched the image on the screen grow sharper. Everything she could and should hope for. We're still uncovering the mystery of the forest massacre, where the body count has now risen to over 40. 2 shot-down helicopters were found right at the center of the forest fire, and investigators are still completely stumped. She changed the channel. An ad was blaring right in her face, and Selene turned off the volume before her head slowly slumped back and she stared at the ceiling. The old spots were still there. Like everything in here, they would probably be here long after she had either gotten a new apartment or died. She closed her eyes for a moment and listened to the noises surrounding her. Some of her neighbors were screaming again, others were playing music. There was a new noise cutting through all the rest. Not by volume, but by intensity. She could hear it clearly. Someone was talking. No, reading something. it felt like. And that, not in her language. Not in any language Selene had ever heard around here. Visio Nocturna. She could feel the air surrounding her turning cold as the hair along her arms stood up. This distinctive smell filled her nostrils, sharp like salt and sulfur. The voice sounded so familiar, and its words lulled her in. Selene felt like she was hovering in darkness, like the apartment around her was falling away as something big and formless lifted her up. She knew she should feel afraid, petrified even, but all the noises around her had stopped, and she somehow finally felt at peace. There was no fear anymore, no dread about getting fired the next few days, no anxiety about what the future would hold. All that mattered was that voice, still reading, chanting the words in a language she didn't know. She was at peace. Somewhere, someone screamed, and suddenly Selene opened her eyes and jumped up from the couch she had been sitting on. Her heart was racing. Something was wrong. She could feel a sticky sensation from where she sat on the couch and smelled the strange sulfur stench in the air. It was dark around her. Too dark. She blinked and shook her head slightly, unsure if she had simply fallen asleep in front of the TV, or if she had moved to the tiny bedroom. Selene turned around and looked through the darkness. Slight shapes were visible. The couch, or what once was a couch, was still behind her, but even it had changed. It was no longer covered in fabric, but something else. Something sticky, wet and warm. She touched it with her foot and felt whatever it was clinging to her skin. Selene shuddered, then listened. The scream had long since vanished, disappeared without a trace, but instead of other people shouting or anyone crying out for help, she could hear nothing. Absolute silence surrounded her. Selene took a step away from the strange couch and toward the now dead TV. Her eyes were slowly adjusting to the darkness, and the shape of the things in her apartment started to take form. It all looked different, like it had been replaced while she slept. The cheap flooring beneath her felt like cold stone. The TV seemed like it was made out of rock, while the rug in the middle of the room slowly moved back and forth. Like a mold, a thought hit her, and she felt herself recoiling. What was happening here? The strange voice had done something to her apartment. Selene turned around and slowly took another step, making sure nothing of her would be touching that rug. She could see now that all her furniture seemed completely changed. There was nothing made of wood in here anymore. Nothing electronic. There was no power running through the cables anywhere in this apartment. Even the fridge, an old model that should have been replaced years ago, was completely silent. She should leave, her instincts told her, but Selene suddenly froze as she finally heard a new noise coming from behind her. The sound of tiny legs scurrying over the stone floor, whizzing by. She could feel the revulsion constricting her throat. Don't run. Some part of her hissed inside her mind. Everything about this apartment had changed. It told her. She was no longer in the complex, but someplace else. And whatever had scurried out of some hole behind her might not be just a simple rat. Selene forced herself to look in front of her and started walking, but behind her the scurrying feet raced up the wall. This wasn't normal. Something truly terrible had happened here. She tried to look to her side and could see the strange, dark red hue everywhere. The whole interior of her apartment had been switched out, changed, and been replaced by something out of this world. Even though it had tried to replicate the shapes, at least at a basic level, Selene could already see a few details clearly. Some of the appliances now looked like things made of stone. Blocks, cubes with something dark growing on them, while others moved on their own. There were organic parts, maybe plants or things stuck to the sheer stone that had replaced her countertop. The place looked like a cave, but not one of this world. Selene felt the sulfur stench stinging in her throat. She needed to get out of here. The scurrying feet were already running around on the ceiling. There was no need to turn around and watch it. She could hear it. Its long body scraped over the stone while dozens of small feet kept moving it forward. Was it aiming for her? Coming after her? Selene felt her blood running cold. Don't scream, she told herself in her mind. Just keep walking. It hadn't screeched at her, hadn't hissed yet. A thing like that would do something before it attacked, right? The feet were still scratching the ceiling of this changed apartment, but it wasn't heading directly for her. This thing seemed to run around aimlessly. She passed by what once was her fridge, and now it looked like nothing more than a big slab of red-hued rock with smooth edges. The door should be in front of her, just a few steps away. There was only one problem. She couldn't see it clearly in the weak and red light. In her mind, the possibility that the door had disappeared completely suddenly took form, and Selene could feel the hair on the back of her neck standing up. If it truly had vanished, she would be locked in here with this thing. The sound of scurrying feet stopped, and so did she. It was something that her subconscious made her do. This strange feeling of being watched had gripped her heart and made her instincts go haywire. It was behind her, above her, staring at her out of eyes that would look so strange, so alien that she might lose her mind if she turned around. Selene could feel herself trembling, yet kept her feet planted and her breathing shallow. She needed to get out of there. Everything inside her mind seemed to scream in unison. Yet, the mere fact that something was crawling around the ceiling behind her made her stop. She wanted to wait until she couldn't feel that thing looking at her anymore. What if it did try to attack her? Would she be able to stop it? To escape? Selene could feel her heart racing. It was coming closer. Slowly, leisurely, but now definitely heading in her direction. Her mind was split in two. One part was telling her to stop, while the other begged her to run. Selene could feel the sweat on her brow. Run. Or stay. Her feet moved before she could decide. Her body had chosen for her. She raced forward, toward the entrance as behind her the clicking of legs sped up. In her headless panic, Selene stretched out her hands as she finally caught a glimpse of the front door. It looked different as well, like a slab of stone covered in strands of organic, pulsing material. She couldn't stop. The thing in her back hissed and screeched. For a single moment, she could see the door clearly. There was no handle anymore, no lock. It was nothing at all like before. With the noises coming from the thing behind her, she couldn't stop. Selene growled and hissed, closed her eyes and threw herself against the covered slab. She felt warm and sticky stuff touching her skin, then her body colliding with something hard, yet brittle. All the air got pressed out of her lungs as the slab gave way and the monster in her back hissed in frustration. Small pieces of the stone-like substance hit her face as she fell forward and rolled out of the apartment, with long, warm strands of unidentifiable stuff still sticking to every part of her. The thing behind her hissed again, and she raised her hands in defense as she stopped her roll and looked back. It really was like nothing she had ever seen before. She could see it clearly now. A long body with fur, yet far too many legs. Pincers snapped in front of what she thought was its mouth, while 6 beady-looking eyes stared at her. Yet, it didn't come again. It stayed there, in her apartment, its upper body raised up until it towered over her, hissing and growling. What the fuck? Selene groaned. It was moving side to side when she could see its legs scratching through the air. Somehow, it couldn't cross the threshold. Selene sighed as she sat there, still shaking like a leaf in the wind. There were other noises now too. She could hear them, very faintly. The sounds of people walking around their apartments and more of these creatures following them. Selene forced herself to look away from the thing in her own place and down the hallway. The light out here was a bit stronger, yet its red hue was just as menacing as inside her apartment. She could see the walls of the place, all transformed into this strange stone, with more of those organic, sticky strands hanging off it like cobwebs. What had happened here? Selene glanced back at the thing still waiting by her door. She didn't even want to know where this monster had come from. What she needed now was to leave, get out of this place. She turned once more to look along the hallway, but could only see more of those stone slabs where windows had been just this morning. Should she try and break through once more? Throw herself at the wall and hope for the best? She struggled to her feet and felt the sticky strands still cling to her skin and clothing. No, if she managed to break through, she'd fall down onto street level. Maybe, even worse, the strands would hold her and suspend her on the outside of the building. It would be better to try and get down to street level, and in the worst case scenario, she could jump out of one of the windows there. Selene turned around and looked back at the hallway in the other direction. This red light was giving her the creeps, but at least nothing moved out here. There were no other strange creatures scurrying around, no strange noises besides those coming from the apartments. Should she try and help them? No way, she thought. She didn't know her neighbors at all and didn't care a single bit about them right now. Opening one of the doors might set something else free, something she really didn't want out here. Selene stood up and pulled off a few of those strands that now seemed to harden. Whatever was going on here, she had to get out first. Maybe the police or whoever would turn up could help the others. That seemed like a better idea. She took a step toward the staircase in the center of the complex, then looked back one last time. This strange monstrosity was still waiting by her door, still swinging side to side while looking at her. Its pincers were clicking softly, almost longingly, and Selene felt a shiver running down her spine. She really needed to get away from there. Still pulling more of those sticky strands off of her, Selene made her way to the staircase, where the young man had bumped into her no more than an hour ago. Just 3 levels down, the exit was waiting. She needed to escape. Selene reached a handrail that now looked like it had been carved from rough stone, grabbed hold of it, and then froze. Looking down at the stairs gave her a bad feeling. The light below was not dimmer, but somehow darker. This red hue looked almost like blood, and the feeling of being watched in return came back as well. A shadow was moving on the half landing below, coming toward her slowly, with only a minimal sound. Selene could feel the cold air brushing past her. This was a nightmare, she thought. Her body didn't move, even though she wanted to run away. Something was coming. She could feel her hands shaking as it took another step. A dark red shadow moving through the red light on the stairwell. It was coming toward her in this unsteady manner, and slowly Selene could hear it breathing. Deep, rattling noises were coming out of this thing. Another step rang hollow in her ears. Had it seen her already? No. Otherwise, it would be coming up far more quickly. She could feel herself shaking, but her fingers were still clamped around the railing, unable to let go. The thing took one more step, and suddenly Selene could see the figure a bit more clearly. It was coming into focus. She could see dark hair, a jacket bound tightly around the midsection, and the slow, methodical steps of someone hurt. Now her body reacted as well. She jumped down the steps, extended a hand and touched the guy on his shoulder before his head shot up and dark eyes fixated upon her. He was hurt. That much was clear. Even in the red light, Selene could see a dark spot on this man's shirt. What happened? She hissed a question, and could immediately see that the guy wasn't even really looking at her. His eyes were unfocused, hazy, and Selene grabbed hold of him to steady him and pulled him up the rest of the stairs. The man was groaning, coughing while keeping his mouth closed, but he followed her as soon as she started pulling and guiding him. Deep, labored breaths came out of him between his fits. This was bad, Selene knew. She had seen accidents in her lifetime. The hurt and lifeless eyes of people still in shock, still not comprehending how badly hurt they were. Carefully, she made the guy sit down away from the stairs, propped against the wall, as she knelt in front of him and softly patted his cheek. A single, tiny glimmer seemed to fill his eyes as they focused for a second, then sunk down again. What's going on here? Selene could feel the dread rising in herself. This man had come from below, and something bad had happened to him there. She nudged him a bit harder and could see his eyes shooting up at her. Guard is below. A low voice came out of him. Venomous. Big. Fast. No chance. Get the book. The one who started it. He was drooling. His head lolled back and forth while Selene tried to steady him. It's here. The book. Somewhere. Please. She could see his fear-wide eyes and sheer panic in them. His voice raised as a hand shot up and held onto her shoulder. Please. Get it. Stop it. Selene was shaking her head, but couldn't find the words to answer, and the man seemed more and more agitated. Someone has it. That damned book. Stop them. Please. This is nightmare. The guy was definitely not from this apartment complex. Selene would have remembered someone looking like that. He had come here from outside, looking for something or someone. Please, he begged once more, now both his hands grabbing hold of her shoulders. Stop it. The book. You need to get the book. The pleading eyes looked up at her, and Selene could see blood now mixing with this man's drool. Red foam was building up in the corners of his mouth. It shimmered in the dark light. Slowly, the eyes were losing focus, and Selene could see the man starting to shake. "What book?" she hissed, as she tried to steady him, tried to hold his gaze again. The thick sheen of sweat on his brow shimmered in the dark red light. "What book?" Selene repeated, as her nails dug into the guy's shoulder. "White." The man mumbled and slumped over and fell to the strange stone floor. He was still breathing, but now his whole body was shaking. Death rattles, Selene thought, and pulled back from him. The guy was dying. Whatever had gotten him down there had killed him in the end. She stood up and wiped her hands on her pants. A book. A white one. Something inside her mind stirred. She could feel the object in her back pocket. The wallet. Selene pulled it out. The guy who had crashed into her. When he had dropped everything, the only object he had picked up had been the white book. She opened the wallet and looked around. Apartment 48. Wallace Grammar. Selene could feel a cold chill as a rumbling went through the floor and walls around her. Something was moving downstairs. If this Wallace guy was part of it, she needed to find him. There was no way in hell she would head down after what she had seen. The guy by her feet was still shaking as his rattling breath left splodges of deep, dark red on the floor next to her. She couldn't do anything to help him, Selene told herself as she stepped back. Especially not here and now. This strange nightmare she found herself in was dangerous enough on its own. Apartment 48. It should be one floor above. This was her only clue. Selene turned toward the stairs and felt more tremors running up through her feet from the floor. It was unmistakable. Something was moving down there. Something big. And it was coming up the stairs. At least that was what her instincts told her. She jumped up the steps, the wallet still in her hand, and could see the red light turning another shade darker. It really looked like a nightmare. Something one should only see in one's dreams. Selene could hear muffled screams coming from the apartments around her. Had they all woken up, locked inside their homes with those things in there too? She shivered at the thought, but forced herself to keep going. This man, Wallace, would know what to do. He couldn't have done that on purpose. Selene reached a half landing and stopped for a moment. The tremors were getting worse, and now she could hear something crawling up the steps below her. Was it coming up here for the corpse? Selene was almost sure. Still, she needed to get away from here. There was no telling what the thing would do if it caught a glimpse of her. If they even hunted with their eyes, a voice in the back of her mind warned her. Maybe it would get a sniff of her scent and follow her up. Selene started running before the tremors could reach the floor below her. She needed to get the book, the man had told her, and there was no reason to doubt him. Maybe he had entered here after this transformation had taken place and had run into whatever was stopping people from leaving. Selene could feel her whole body shaking at the thought. She jumped up the last few steps and found herself looking into a hallway exactly like the one she had left behind downstairs. What if they all were like that? What if the thing downstairs would really come up after her? Selene could feel herself trembling. Apartment 48, she whispered, and let go of the railing, running into the hallway. If the thing came after her, she would be stuck here. There was no way to evade anything if there was just one stairwell. She hoped and prayed it wouldn't come up here. 42, 44, 46. The numbers rushed past her. The next apartment would be it, she told herself, and came to a sliding stop. In her mind, she still had doubts, but those evaporated as she finally saw the door in front of her. Instead of a stone slab covered in those strange strands, she could see a normal wooden door with a lock and handle. Selene could feel her heart beating. This was the source, she knew, and the only safe place in this whole complex. The floor rumbled, and she could hear the unmistakable sound of bones breaking. It was devouring the body below. Selene shook her head and concentrated on the door in front of her. She needed to put a stop to this madness. Only, would the guy open the door for her? If it was her, she wouldn't. Selene took a step back and felt the floor beneath her soles vibrating softly, then heard the sound of something heavy touching the stairs below. She didn't have time. 3 quick steps, and she threw herself against the only normal-looking door in the whole building. The entrance opened inward as she stumbled through the unlocked door into normal, white light. Someone was screaming. It was Wallace, the guy sitting at the table with a cup and the book open in front of him. Selene could feel the electricity in the air, combined with a breeze far too cold to be natural. "Wallace! Stop it!" she howled and cut through his shocked scream. He looked at her with wide-open eyes as she slid to a stop and steadied herself on the counter. No doubts clouded her mind. This was his doing. "Stop this shit this instant!" Finally, there was movement. The man rose from the chair, now completely ignoring the book, and shook his head ever so slowly. No, he whispered. Selene took a step toward him, but he rounded the table as if to shield the book from her view. "No," he repeated, now blocking her way. "What the fuck have you done?" Selene hissed at him, but the man standing in front of her, his arms wide, simply shook his head in response. "This is your fault. All of you. They gave it to me. My salvation. Now you can all live in my nightmare." He was looking at her with this hateful gaze. Anger and rage were burning in his eyes. "Stop it this instant!" Selene tried again, but as she took a step closer, the man's arm blocked her way. "You're killing people! Innocent people!" He was shaking his head again while muttering, "No," under his breath. "They gave it to me so I could show you. This is my salvation, my revenge. All of you. You all deserve it." 2 hands grabbed hold of Selene's shoulders, pinning her in place as the eyes of the man grew ever darker. "I am here to show you. Everyone will see it soon. The way you treat me. You all deserve it." Madness clouded the face that was looking down at her, and Selene could hear the thing coming up the stairs already reaching the landing. Would it find her in here? She tried to shove the guy, but he simply shrugged off her hand. "You will see. You will..." He didn't get any further before Selene kicked him hard. The words caught in his throat as he bowled over, and she shoved him out of the way. Selene could hear the massive body of a monster slithering along the hallway outside. It was coming, her instincts told her. Her time was running out. Selene ran for the table and book, but suddenly felt a hand grabbing her leg. The guy, still kneeling on the floor, was holding onto her, hissing now through gritted teeth. "Leave," he growled. Selene could hear the thing outside the apartment coming toward them. It was following her. They were all dying. She looked down at the figure of the man who was staring up at her with pure hatred in his eyes. He lunged at her and dug his fingernails into her hips to stop her as she tried to whirl back around. The guy was mad, completely insane. Selene grabbed the first thing she could reach, the cup on the table next to the book, and swung it at his head. With a loud crack, it burst, followed by a scream before the hands left her as the man fell to the floor. Selene looked up. The door was still standing open, but now she could see something big and dark in the red light behind it. A monstrously large version of the thing in her apartment. Its head was almost too big to fit through the door. She grabbed hold of the book and felt a surge of fear and pain flooding her as she threw the damn thing across the room and toward the open entrance. Selene hardly remembered anything anymore. She knew the monster had disappeared as the book had touched the ground and closed, that she had pinned Wallace to the floor until the police had turned up. But now, it all seemed strangely surreal. Without a red light and malformed walls and floors, it all felt impossible. Sirens were still blaring through the night, coming toward the apartment complex. Some of the officers swarming the building had been whispering about dead bodies everywhere. She looked up and passed the officer, standing in front of her. There was a woman, dressed in grey. She had been walking around the place, but no one seemed to even glance at her. Selene shivered as their eyes met. The woman smiled and raised a finger to her lips, and Selene could feel her throat closing up. She watched without a word as the strange woman picked a book up from the floor and disappeared through the open door, none of the officers around the apartment even looking in her direction. This was bad, a voice in the back of her mind told her, but she couldn't muster the strength to stand up or say something. The policeman in front of her was shaking his head as he unclipped a pair of handcuffs from his belt. She didn't resist. Any place, every place was better than this apartment complex. At least in prison, the monster wouldn't find her again.